The universe doesn't overwhelm us all at once. It does so quietly. Kevin, they're numbers too large to imagine. Distances that stretch far beyond feeling. Your mind pauses, not because it's weak, but because it was never meant for this scale. We evolved to watch the horizon, not the infinite. To count days, not billions of years. And somewhere between curiosity and confusion, the brain gently lets go. Not in failure, but in self-protection. The human brain was shaped by survival, not by infinity. It learned to notice movement in the grass, not galaxies in motion. Speed mattered more than scale. Clarity mattered more than completeness. We feel comfortable with distances we can walk, with time we can count in mornings and nights. Beyond that, understanding softens and loses its edges. Locked numbers don't frighten the brain, they exhaust it. When experience can't anchor meaning, the mind quietly steps back. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a boundary of design. Primifies and protects itself from overload. Infinity offers no edge to rest against, no beginning to lean on, no ending to release tension. So the mind chooses calm over mastery. It accepts models instead of intuition, symbols instead of feelings. And in that acceptance, something gentle happens. We stop trying to dominate the universe. We learn to observe it with humility. As numbers grow larger, emotion fades instead of rising. 1,000,000 still feels like something. 1,000,000,000 already feels abstract. 1,000,000,000,000 becomes quiet and flat. The brain does not measure size the way the universe does. It measures relevance. What cannot be touched, changed, or survived is the mind stays balanced, not by understanding everything, but by understanding enough. Afghanistan has no obligation to match human intuition. Its rules bend time, stretch space, and dissolve direction. Linear linking loosens its grip here. Science steps in where feeling cannot follow. Equations replace instinct. Models stand in for experience. We don't feel the universe expanding. We calculate it. And at some point, effort turns into release. The need to fully grasp gives way to simple awareness. We are not small because we cannot contain the universe. We are human because we don't have to. Commenced for edges because edges feel safe. Beginnings offer direction. Endings offer rest. Affles. The universe offers neither in a way we can feel. It tonight without pause. It be withens without asking to be witnessed. It simplifies. It narrows attention to what can be lived. A breath, a moment, a single night sky, held without needing to last. Meaning returns at smaller scales, in patterns we can revisit, in questions we don't need to finish. Understanding becomes partial by choice. Not everything must be held at once. The universe remains vast and indifferent, and what put one, move the later. The main will be litter everything, and adhere this coming friends and incredible myself. The mind remains local and gentle. Between the two, there is no conflict, only a quiet agreement. To observe without owning, to wonder without control. There is relief in accepting limits. The mind loosens when it stops reaching for everything at once. Not knowing becomes a quiet space instead of a problem to solve. We were never meant to carry the universe inside our thoughts. Only small pieces, only moments that fit within a lifetime. Kabul don't require our understanding. They continue whether we name them or not. Their distance does not shrink with explanation. Watch changes is us. Kabul uncertainty without tension. To let questions remain open without urgency. Curiosity softens into presence. A glance upward is enough. Wonder does not need resolution. The universe stays vast. The mind stays human. And between them, there is a calm recognition. We are here to notice, not to contain. Lag's time stretches differently when scale disappears. Minutes feel solid. Centuries feel thin. Attacks completely to what moves at human speed. Heartbeats, shadows crossing a room. Cosmos time age silently. Galaxies drift without memory. Trying to feel this span creates strain, so the mind releases the effort. What can be sensed? Understanding becomes layered, not complete. Facts live beside mystery. Knowledge rests beside silence. There is no urgency to resolve the universe. It has already outlived every question. Fallback is the moment of contact. Kissing, a quiet realization of distance. Iversity against sail. The universe remains beyond us. The mind remains within itself. And that distance is not emptiness, teammate to breathe. The brain learns early to narrow its focus. It chooses what matters and lets the rest fade. This is how attention survives. This is how meaning forms. In everyday life, this narrowing feels natural. We move through rooms, not continents. We plan weeks, not millennia. The world feels sized to our thoughts, phased. But the universe does not adjust itself. It continues at scales that ignore human rhythm. Distances stretch beyond comparison. Time unfolds without reference to memory. When the mind meets this contrast, it slows down. Not from fear, from overload. The brain was never designed to feel cosmic space. There is no sensory pathway for millions of light years, no emotional register for the birth and death of stars. So perception thins. Numbers remain, but sensation dissolves. This thinning is often misunderstood. It looks like disinterest. It feels like confusion. But it is closer to rest. The mind protects itself by releasing what cannot be carried. It does not argue with the universe. It simply steps back. We imagine understanding as accumulation. More facts, more explanations, more reach. But in vastness, understanding often works in reverse. It becomes subtraction. Letting go of the need to grasp everything at once, allowing partial views to be enough. Science gives structure to what intuition cannot hold. Equations replace feeling. Graphs replace imagery. These tools extend thought without demanding emotion. They allow the brain to touch the universe indirectly, without strain, without illusion of control. Yet even science knows its limits. Models are provisional. Theories bend and revise. Certainty remains local. Beyond those boundaries, silence begins. Not ignorance, not defeat, just absence of human scale. The universe does not resist understanding. It simply does not respond to it. Preferring dogs operate whether they are known or not. Its expansion does not pause for reflection. This indifference can feel unsettling at first. Then it becomes neutral. Eventually, it becomes calm. There is no requirement to matter to the universe. Existence does not ask for validation. Meaningless does not need cosmic endorsement. Exection, a body in space, a breath in time, a thought forming and dissolving. NGOs are scales the brain can hold. They carry weight. They create continuity. When we stop forcing the universe into human proportions, something softens. Wonder no longer competes with comprehension. Curiosity no longer demands closure. We can look upward without tension. We can read without expecting completion. We can ask questions that do not require answers. Featured, the universe remains vast and unresolved. The mind remains limited and alive. Between them is a quiet balance. Observation without ownership. Awareness without dominance. The brain does not fail here. It performs exactly as it was shaped to. Choosing coherence over totality. Choosing presence over infinity. And in that choice, there is peace. Eventually, the mind stops asking the universe to make sense in human terms. Characterization for scale to shrink. It stops expecting clarity to arrive all at once. This shift does not happen suddenly. It unfolds quietly, through repetition, through exposure, through the slow realization that some questions do not resolve, they settle. At first, the unknown feels like a gap, something missing, something unfinished. Over time, the gap becomes a space, a place where thought can rest, a place where imagination can move without pressure. The brain begins to understand its role differently, not as a container for everything, but as a filter, a lens, shaving day viewpoint passing through an immense structure. We often confuse limitation with loss, yet limits are what give shape. Without them, attention would dissolve, memory would scatter. The universe has no need for such boundaries. It carries all scales at once, violent and gentle, rapid and still. The human mind cannot do this, so it chooses sequence, moving one step at a time, one thought after another, one image at a time. This sequencing creates time as we feel it, a flow that moves forward, almost without being noticed. A sense of before and after, a narrative that can be followed. Cosmic reality does not follow narratives. Stars do not remember their beginnings. Galaxies do not anticipate endings. They simply persist within physical law. Try to feel this persistence directly overwhelms the nervous system. So the mind abstracts. It converts immensity into symbols, light years into numbers, ages into diagrams. These symbols are not failures of imagination. They are acts of translation, bridges between scales that cannot meet directly. Still, translation always loses texture. The warmth of experience fades. Emotion thins. Feel? While large numbers feel empty, not because they are meaningless, but because they exceed sensation. 1 billion seconds is time without memory. 1 trillion miles is distance without movement. The brain acknowledges them, then releases them. Release is not avoidance, it is regulation. Forgiveness. The nervous system stays within ranges it can support. Too much scale collapses coherence. Too much infinity erases reference points. So the mind returns to what anchors it. Graves. Rhythm. Pattern. Advanced about meaningful even when the universe expands. A thought remains real even when galaxies collide elsewhere. Meaning does not compete with vastness. It occupies a different dimension. Human significance is not measured by size or duration. It emerges from relation, from contrast, from presence within limits. Therapists does not need to notice us for experience to matter. Awareness is already complete at the scale where it occurs. Once this is understood, humility replaces anxiety. Not humility as self-erasure, but humility as alignment. Flesh. We stop placing ourselves against the universe and start placing ourselves within it. Observation becomes quieter. Questions become softer. Curiosity becomes patient, willing to linger. We no longer rush toward final explanations. We allow understanding to remain provisional, flexible, incomplete, fleeing. Beyond to unfold beyond comprehension, and the mind continues to choose coherence over total access. Freshness is not a conflict. It is a partnership shaped by difference. The universe offers endless structure. The mind offers momentary awareness. Conflicting, together they create something rare. A finite perspective touching the infinite. Profitability. Gently. Not to contain it, not to master it. Embell it passing through thought. With time, the urge to compare fades. We stop measuring ourselves against distance and age. The question of size loses urgency. Is orientation. Where attention rests. How awareness moves. The mind learns that vastness does not demand response. It exists without invitation, without instruction. Trying to match it with effort only creates strain. So effort eases. Attention narrows naturally, like a lens finding focus. This narrowing is not withdrawal. Thermometer. At its own scale. How it rises, holds, and falls. How it prefers continuity over completeness. Forbes was shaped to keep a body alive, to predict nearby outcomes, to adjust within short horizons. when it encounters scales without consequence to survival, eyes them, not out of denial, out of relevance. Forbes the universe contains more than can be acted upon. Blindness select what can be responded to, almost without noticing the choice. Definitely is often mistaken for care requires limits. Without limits, attention would scatter endlessly. Nothing would stand out. Nothing would settle into meaning. The cosmos holds every contrast at once. Creation and decay, expansion and collapse. The human mind cannot hold all contrasts simultaneously, so it sequences them, moment by moment. Subpoena creates intimacy. A single idea can be felt and allowed to remain. Forbidden does not linger. Disobedience, convictions. So the mind stays where texture remains. Repression still has weight. Where experience still leaves understanding means enlargement, reaching farther, knowing more. But deeper understanding often feels quieter. Inclusion. We still feels complete, knowing to work the nate. We know to the beginning the page that we're just available, and sense it. Less stretched. Behind does not become smaller. The need to encompass it does.
Skladi curiosity shifts shape. Afflicted pushing outward. It begins to settle inward. Not inward as retreat, inward as grounding. Behind, the mind recognizes that it is a passage, not a vault. Thoughts move through it. Insights pass and dissolve. To hold everything blocks this movement. Letting go restores flow. Even the most advanced knowledge remains provisional. It updates, it revises, it yields to better models. Thumbnail mirrors the mind's nature, adaptation over permanence. The itself, kissing patterns gradually, unevenly, sometimes not at all. On of inquiry, questions soften, kissed expectations loosen. There is no final picture to complete, only perspectives to refine. The night sky becomes less a problem to solve and more a condition to inhabit. The academic's distance stops being a challenge. Time stops being a threat. Bedside, they become background, a wide stillness behind thought. Against this stillness, human experience sharpens. Defiance, a money, memory, a fleeting realization. These do not diminish because the universe is large. They gain clarity because attention is finite. Meaning does not require scale. It requires presence. The universe remains vast, indifferent, unresolved. The mind remains limited, adaptive, alive. Neither needs to resemble the other. Their meeting is brief and unbalanced, but it is enough. Awareness touches immensity without absorbing it, and then moves on, not defeated, not diminished, simply human. At some point, the mind stops reaching outward for reassurance. It no longer asks whether it is small or large in comparison. Those questions lose their grip. What matters instead is steadiness, the ability to remain oriented within experience, to stand inside awareness without needing to expand it. Prosecule continues without pause. Its motion does not accelerate for curiosity. Its silence does not break for understanding. This constancy becomes easier to accept when expectation fades, when the mind stops treating vastness as something to conquer or something to solve. The brain was shaped to navigate immediacy, to track change within reachable distance, to respond to signals that affect survival. Cosmic scales do not send such signals. They do not require response. So the brain treats them differently. They become background knowledge, acknowledged, then set aside. This is not avoidance, it is efficiency. Attention is a limited resource. The mind spends it where feedback exists, where action can follow perception. The universe offers almost no feedback at human scale. It remains unmoved by thought, unfortaltered by awareness. So the mind turns toward what can answer, the present moment, the internal rhythm of thought. Here, causality still operates, intent still has weight, memory still shapes expectation. Infinity disrupts these patterns. It removes consequence. It stretches cause and effect until they no longer touch. The brain cannot live inside that stretch, so it does not try. Instead, it builds meaning locally, from repetition, from familiarity, from continuity across moments. Meaning grows where limits exist, where contrast can be felt, where change is slow enough to notice. The universe contains everything at once. The mind contains almost nothing for long. Thought arises, peaks, dissolves. Insight appears, then fades. Certainty softens with time. This impermanence mirrors the universe more than mastery ever could. Not in scale, but in process. Nothing holds. Everything moves. Understanding this changes how vastness feels. It no longer threatens coherence. It no longer demands explanation. The night sky becomes a field of quiet information, present without urgency, available without obligation. Looking upward no longer invites confusion. It invites stillness. The mind does not need to follow every implication. It does not need to simulate eternity. It does not need to internalize distance. Authorization can rest without expansion. Curiosity can exist without pressure. The desire to know everything relaxes into the ability to notice. Notice how thought responds, how it narrows, how it settles when left alone. The universe is not a puzzle waiting to be solved by a single mind. It is a condition that exceeds ownership. Accepting this removes a subtle tension, the tension of centrality. The assumption that understanding must be total to be valid. Forbidden perspective is partial by nature. Formality is not a flaw. It is what allows focus. Without focus, nothing could be felt deeply. Nothing could matter at all. The universe does not offer depth at human scale. The mind creates it through limitation. A Fitting's lens produces clarity. Summers' one produces noise. This is why the brain chooses edges, why it prefers beginnings and endings, why it works in sequences. Sequence creates meaning. Sequence creates memory. Confessed, the universe does not remember itself. It does not require narrative. Preventive. And that difference does not separate us from it. It defines how we touch it. Briefly, awareness passes through vastness without attempting to stay. It observes, then returns to itself. The universe remains unchanged. The mind remains intact. Nothing needs to collapse for this relationship to work. for both.
In the end, the mind learns a different kind of balance, not between knowing and not knowing, but between effort and ease. It recognizes when inquiry sharpens awareness and when it only adds weight. This recognition grows slowly, through repetition rather than insight. We live surrounded by scales we cannot feel, particles too small to register, distances too wide to picture, durations too long to remember. Yet daily life continues without interruption. The body moves, thoughts form. Decisions are made within narrow windows of time. The universe does not interfere with this rhythm. It allows it, silently. The mind adapts by staying close to consequence, what follows from action, what responds to attention, what changes when noticed. These are the conditions under which thought stays grounded. Outside them, cognition loosens, meaning thins. Vastness does not demand rejection. It simply cannot be engaged continuously. So the mind touches it briefly, then returns to its own scale. This movement becomes familiar, under without immersion. The brain does not need to remain inside the infinite to respect it. Distance itself becomes a form of respect. We often imagine that understanding should expand indefinitely, but expansion without structure collapses clarity. The mind needs contours. It needs contrast to orient itself. Stiffness offers few contours at human scale. Its patterns are real, blister. We translate. We model. These translations are not reductions. They are accommodations. Ways of meeting something too large without dissolving into it. Beam's signift language model remains symbolic. This does not weaken them. It defines their role. They are tools, not mirrors. Far. The mind does not mistake tools for reality forever. With time, it learns the difference. It stops expecting feeling to accompany fact. 1 billion years can be known without being felt. A galaxy can be described without being imagined. This separation is not emptiness, is alignment. Emotion stays where experience exists. Thought extends beyond it, carefully. When the two are forced together, confusion arises. When they are allowed to differ, clarity returns. The universe does not ask for emotional comprehension. It does not offer reassurance. It does not reflect concern. It simply unfolds. Conflicting, the mind, shaped by vulnerability, responds by choosing what to carry. It does not carry everything. It cannot. Then selectivity preserves coherence. It preserves continuity of self. Without it, awareness would fragment across endless reference frames. Nothing would feel stable. Stability is not rigidity. It is the ability to remain oriented amid constant change. The brain achieves this by narrowing focus again and again. This narrowing gives rise to intimacy. A thought can be followed. A memory can be held. A question can linger without dissolving. Infinity does not linger. Edges the anger that make lingering possible. So the mind does not stay there. Instead, it develops a quieter relationship with vastness, one that does not demand resolution, one that allows distance to remain distance. Looking outward becomes an act of pause, not pursuit. A moment of alignment, not expansion. The universe remains uncentered. We do not become smaller because of this. We become more accurately placed. Aperture adjusts. Urgency softens. There is no need to hurry toward ultimate explanations. There is no final position to reach. Understanding becomes something lived, preferring. Fuse. A rhythm forms between attention and release, between curiosity and rest. Mind intact within a reality that far exceeds it. The universe does not need to be held to be acknowledged. A thing it does not need to be internalized to be respected. Awareness touches it lightly, then returns to the immediacy of experience. A thought completes its arc. A breath ends. Recognize. These small cycles continue inside an immeasurable backdrop. Neither cancels the other. Exhibitions does not erase the local. The local does not challenge the vast. Coexist without comparison. Unemployment may remains open. And within that asymmetry, there is room enough for calm. Over time, the mind stops treating vastness as a question. It becomes a condition, something present but not demanding engagement. Shift is subtle. There is no clear moment when it happens, only a gradual easing of pressure. The brain no longer strains to imagine totality. It no longer tries to picture what has no edge. Instead, it allows the unknown to remain undefined. This allowance brings a quiet stability. Thought moves more slowly, with longer pauses between turns. Attention becomes less restless. We begin to notice how often the need to understand is really a need to feel secure, to know where things stand, to know where we stand within them. The universe offers no such positioning. It does not orient itself around observers. It does not provide landmarks for meaning. At first, this absence can feel disorienting. Then it feels neutral. Eventually, it feels freeing, like setting something down. It does not need cosmic context to function. It needs coherence at its own scale. That coherence is built from repetition, from familiar patterns, from causes that lead to effects within reach. The universe does not operate at this pace, or two changes are either too slow, so the mind stops waiting for alignment. It accepts that most of reality will remain background. Background does not mean irrelevant. It means stable enough to be ignored. Attained or not. It is measured or not. The universe expands without asking permission. Life continues inside this expansion without contradiction. The mind learns that it does not need to scale up to meet reality. Reality does not require symmetry. Understanding becomes contextual, local, provisional. This does not reduce its value. It makes it usable. A thought that fits within awareness can be followed to its end. A question that fits within experience can be held without strain. Questions that exceed this scale are allowed to remain unanswered without becoming threats. That must be confronted, banged, not something that can be acknowledged, allergies, and then left alone. This is not resignation. It is maturity of attention. The mind learns when to engage and when to release. When curiosity enriches experience and when it dilutes it. Its sharpness, once released, presses against thought. Again, as it always was. Cliffs itself becomes reassuring. It reminds the mind of its own boundaries, pied boundaries that allow rest. Conflicting boundaries, attention would never settle. Every thought would dissolve into endless reference. The universe contains selecting a few. Selection creates meaning. Meaning creates continuity. Continuity allows identity to persist, Philippines to the next. This fragile. It depends on scale. Too much vastness fractures it. Little context confines it. So the mind hovers in between, aware of what exceeds it without attempting to absorb it. This hovering is not indecision. It is balance. The brain does not reject the infinite. It simply refuses to live inside it. Instead, it returns to sensation, to the cadence of breath, to the rhythm of thought forming and dissolving. These rhythms do not compete with cosmic time. They exist alongside it. This coexistence, the mind does, then that noticing is enough. Integrate everything. Prescribe to resolve the unknown. Understanding is allowed to remain partial. Awareness is allowed to remain human. Ramifications started without comment. The mind continues with care. Neither interrupts the other. In this quiet arrangement, tension dissolves. Urgency fades. What remains is a steady presence within an immeasurable backdrop. The vast does not need to be held to be real. The finite does not need permission to matter. Therapists brothers where it can function. The universe remains where it cannot reach. Between these two positions, nothing is missing. For acknowledged to move, for questions to arise and pass, for awareness to remain intact. Not everything must be understood for experience to be complete. The stone stays open, the mind stays grounded. And in that quiet division, both continue exactly as they are. Vastness grows quiet. The mind does not abandon curiosity. It simply stops circling the same edges. Plumbing. What once felt distant and overwhelming, becomes familiar in its distance. The unknown no longer presses for interpretation. Clinging. This familiarity does not come from understanding more. It comes from expecting less. The brain learns that not everything encountered is meant to be processed deeply. Some things exist best as context, a wide backdrop that remains untouched. The universe settles into this role, always present. Rest feeding, turbulence. Immensity stops interrupting thought. Its silence stops demanding response. The mind, relieved of pressure, returns to its natural tempo. Ideas rise and fall without urgency. Attention moves where it is needed. We begin to notice how rarely vastness actually enters daily awareness, how quickly thought returns to proportion. A step forward matters more than a light year. A decision carries more weight than 1 billion years. This is not denial. It is scale alignment, consequence.
It stays near what can change something, what can be influenced, what can be answered. Fully, it remains neutral to intention, unnamed by awareness. Conflicting continues to arise in bounded spaces, in relationships between events, pulled in continuity across moments. These spaces feel complete, even when surrounded by incomprehensible size. The brain does not require total context to function coherently. It only requires enough structure to support continuity of experience. Infinity offers no such structure. It dissolves edges rather than defining them. Without edges, attention has nowhere to rest. Personalers, so the mind does not stay. Barracks.
It develops a quieter confidence. Not confidence in answers, but confidence in orientation. It knows where it belongs. Within space, it can move through. Beyond that, it observes without attachment. The universe becomes a presence rather than a challenge, something acknowledged, then left unchanged. This relationship no longer feels asymmetrical, not because balance is achieved, but because balance is no longer expected. The mind does not need equivalence to remain intact. It accepts that awareness is brief, localized, and sufficient. Trying to extend it beyond its limits adds no clarity, only strain. Someone's effort gives way to attentiveness. Attention replaces ambition. The night sky no longer triggers comparison. It triggers pause. A recognition that not everything must be entered, kissing, to be respected. Behind the mind learns that distance can be meaningful without becoming intimate. That not knowing can coexist with stability. This coexistence reshapes curiosity. It becomes less urgent, less insistent. Questions no longer rush toward resolution. They remain open without tension. The universe does not move closer, but the need to move toward it fades. Presence becomes enough. Awareness settles into its own boundaries. Those boundaries do not feel restrictive. Plight feel supportive. Within them, thought remains clear. Memory remains coherent. Identity remains continuous. Without them, everything would blur. The mind understands this instinctively. It stops resisting its own design. The universe continues to exceed comprehension. That fact loses its charge, its condition of existence. Like gravity, something real, something attention, the mind no longer tries to stand outside itself, to grasp totality. Patriotism and flashlight. Because it does not shrink. Poorer, it becomes precise. Awareness sharpens at its natural scale. Meaning gathers where contrast exists. Experience gains depth through limitation. The universe does not notice this adjustment. It does not respond. The mind feels the difference. Thought moves more freely. Silence becomes comfortable. There is no longer a sense of being outmatched, only a recognition of difference. The finite does not compete with the infinite. It operates alongside it. Affles each remains intact. Museum stays open, expansive, unresolved. The mind stays local, adaptive, continuous. Neither needs to absorb the other. Between them
life through moments without carrying the weight of everything else. And that is enough.
In this settled state, the mind no longer treats limitation as something to overcome, defiance limitation as the condition that makes experience possible. Without it, awareness would have no center, rest. Every thought depends on exclusion. To focus on one thing is to release countless others. This release is not loss, it is function. The universe does not require this narrowing. It holds all relations simultaneously. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is emphasized. The human mind cannot live this way. So it lives by selection, by rhythm. A gentle repetition it can return to. This rhythm gives rise to time as it is felt. Not the time of physics, but the time of continuity. Moments linked just closely enough to form a sense of flow. Cosmic time does not flow like this. It stretches and compresses without regard to memory. Its scale breaks narrative. Trying to scale creates tension. The mind searches for relevance and finds none. Eventually, searching. Parliamentary, the universe does not become more comprehensible. The need for it to be comprehensible dissolves. This does not lead to indifference, it leads to precision. Attention becomes more exact when it is no longer scattered across impossible scales. Thought becomes quieter, less performative. There is no need to impress the universe with understanding. No audience waits for explanation. Meaning returns to where it always lived, within relation, within contrast, affirmed by another, a presence felt against absence. These transitions are enough. The brain does not need infinity to validate them. They are complete at their own scale. When this is accepted, Washington becomes background again, foreign-ed. With this understanding, the mind no longer resists its own shape. It stops imagining itself as unfinished. It accepts that awareness was never meant to stretch without end. What once felt like a ceiling begins to feel like a frame, a structure that allows thought to take form. Without a frame, nothing could appear clearly. Universe does not offer frames. It extends in all directions without pause. Its openness is absolute. The human mind answers with containment, not as opposition, as necessity. Containment gives weight to experience. A thought can land. A memory can settle. Without containment, everything would pass too quickly or not at all. The brain learns this through living, through fatigue, through moments when effort no longer produces clarity. It learns when to stop extending questions outward and allow them to dissolve inward. This dissolution is gentle. It does not erase curiosity. It reshapes it. Curiosity becomes quieter, less driven by completion, freshness to texture. Instead of asking what the universe ultimately is, the mind begins to notice how understanding behaves, how it arrives, how it leaves. Understanding no longer needs to accumulate. It only needs to appear when relevant. The universe offers no feedback loop for comprehension. It does not confirm accuracy. It does not respond to insight. So insware, in coherence, in usefulness, in the ability to orient without strain. The mind stops seeking confirmation from vastness. It does not require agreement from scale. Windshield remains valid even when the universe remains silent. This silence loses its weight. It is no longer interpreted as absence. It becomes a neutral condition. Against that neutrality, human experience sharpens. B. A single realization carries more clarity than an entire abstract horizon. The brain learns to trust proximity. What can be felt does not reject distant knowledge. It simply places it where it belongs, outside immediate experience. This placement creates balance. The mind remains open without being flooded. Infinity stays intact without demanding residence. The night sky can be observed, does not try to step into cosmic time. It allows cosmic time to remain impersonal. Instead, it returns to duration it can feel. Seconds, intervals of thought, intervals of thought. Continuity builds identity. Identified here is not a claim of importance. It is a functional center, a place from which awareness moves. Without such a center, experience would scatter endlessly. The universe has no center. It does not require one. The embarrass the human mind does. Reaffirming this difference removes comparison. There is no longer a question of adequacy. The mind does not fail by being finite. It succeeds by remaining coherent. Coherence is fragile. On storm, too much openness dissolves it. So the mind chooses boundaries without resentment. These boundaries do not close it off from reality. They allow it to function within reality. The universe continues to expand beyond comprehension. This fact no longer presses inward. It stays where it belongs, outside the frame of immediate awareness. The mind rests more easily now. Thoughts no longer spiral outward endlessly, who complete themselves. Completes resolution at the correct scale. A question ends when it no longer guides attention, not when it is answered absolutely. The universe offers no absolute answers. Pleasures, so the mind stops asking absolute questions. It asks, what can be lived with? What can be held without tension? This shift is not philosophical. It is practical. The nervous system relaxes. Attention steadies. Awareness no longer oscillates between fascination and overload. It stays present. Universe does not shrink in strongest, unresolved, no longer competes for space inside the mind. Occupies a different register. The infinite remains infinite. Neither attempts to replace the other. The mind does not dissolve into scale. The universe does not bend toward meaning. Between them, life continues. Moments arise and pass. Kissing, connect, and release. The vast remains untouched. The local remains vivid. This arrangement requires no agreement, only recognition. Belongs. The universe remains where nothing collapses. Hancock moves forward without carrying what it cannot hold. And in that movement, there is steadiness. At this stage, the mind no longer treats acceptance as an achievement. It feels ordinary, like learning the limits of a familiar landscape. There is no announcement when this happens, no conclusion reached, only a steady sense that effort has found its proper boundary. To stretch itself thin across every possible scale. It conserves energy. It moves with intention. Conservation is not laziness, it is wisdom shaped by constraint. Attention becomes more deliberate. It lingers where it can make contact. It withdraws where contact dissolves into abstraction. University offers endless abstraction, durations that cannot be crossed, out. The mind learns to acknowledge these facts without attempting to internalize them. Internalization is costly. It drains clarity. It scatters focus. So the mind lets vastness remain external, present as context, absent from direct engagement. Then choice does not diminish curiosity. It stabilizes it. Curiosity stops reaching outward indiscriminately. It becomes selective, attentive to proportion. Then brain understands intuitively that not all information deserves equal weight. Weight comes from consequence, from feedback, from the ability to respond and adjust. The universe offers almost no feedback to individual awareness. It does not change when noticed. It does not reply to interpretation. This lack of reciprocity matters. The mind orients towards systems that answer back. Conversation, movement, memory. These are domains where attention has traction, where effort changes outcome. Vastness does not operate this way. It remains unmoved. Recognizing this allows the mind to disengage without guilt, without the sense of having failed a task. There was never a task. If a universe does not require comprehension, it does not wait for an audience. Meaning arises elsewhere, in relation, in continuity. The thought gains meaning by connecting to another. A moment gains meaning by fitting into a sequence. Infinity breaks sequence. Its stretches mind does not stay there. It returns to manageable scales, where time can be felt passing, space can be crossed. These scales support orientation. They allow the mind to locate itself. Location is essential. Without it, awareness floats without anchor. The universe has no anchor point. The mind must provide its own. This anchor is not fixed in space. It is functional. It moves with attention. Experience becomes grounded. The mind learns to trust this grounding. Firefight seeking external confirmation from scale or duration, but no longer asks whether experience matters in the face of immensity. That question dissolves, not because it is answered, but because it no longer applies. Significance does not compete with size. They operate on different axes. The universe measures itself in expansion and energy. The mind measures in coherence and continuity. Neither system invalidates the other. Understanding this removes tension. The sense of being outmatched fades. The mind no longer positions itself against the universe. It positions itself within experience. Experience is not diminished by the existence of what exceeds it. It becomes clearer by contrast. A single thought stands out against an immeasurable background. The background does not erase the thought, it frames it. This framing is quiet. It does not demand attention. A reminder, not a challenge. Psychologists, a reminder that not everything encountered needs to be resolved. Prejudice is a local requirement. Proficiency and accha. Where action is impossible, resolution to differentiate. It stops carrying questions meant for different scales. Differentiation lightens cognition. Thought flows with less resistance. Silence becomes less threatening.
uncertainty loses its sharp edges. The universe remains uncertain. That uncertainty no longer spills inward. It stays at a distance that allows calm observation. Observation without ownership. Awareness without absorption. The mind rests more often now. Preventive in inactivity, but in stability. Thought completes itself. Kissing returns naturally. There is no pressure to extend awareness beyond its capacity. No compulsion to simulate the infinite. Panoramic honors its own design. Sequential, finite. Not an accident. It is what makes lived experience possible. Without finitude, permissible, there would be no focus, no memory, no sense of progression. The universe does not require these qualities. The mind does. Accepting this distinction resolves nothing cosmic, but it resolves something internal. The need to measure oneself against vastness fades. Comparison dissolves. The mind no longer asks how it fits into the universe. It recognizes that fitting is not required. Existence does not demand symmetry. The universe remains vast, indifferent, ongoing. Mind remains limited, attentive, alive. Nature, awareness moves through moments without attempting to carry what cannot be held. Thought remains clear because it stays within its own scale. And in that clarity, gunshot continues, kissing without strain or urgency or the need for total understanding. As this rhythm settles, the mind grows comfortable with its own pacing. It no longer rushes to keep up with what cannot be kept up with. Speed becomes selective. Attention moves where it can land. There is a quiet confidence in this selectivity, not confidence in answers, but confidence in navigation. The brain knows how to move through experience without mapping everything. It relies on signals that matter locally. Change, contrast, continuity. The universe does not provide these signals in ways the body can feel. Its changes are too vast or too distant, so the mind treats them as stable background. Backgrounds is not absence. It is what allows the foreground to stand out. Without a stable background, nothing could be noticed clearly. Everything would compete for attention. Nothing would remain long enough to matter. The universe, in its immensity, becomes this background. Steady, unresponsive, unmoved by individual perception. This steadiness supports the mind more than it overwhelms it, but the brain learns to rest against this constancy, not by understanding it, but by trusting it to remain unchanged by thought. Trust does not require comprehension. It requires predictability. The universe is predictable in one way. It will not adapt itself to human concern. Rebellability allows the mind to disengage without fear. Nothing will be missed. Nothing will suddenly require response. Preventive attention is freed to return inward, to thought as it unfolds, to memory as it connects. Still operate at human scale. A question leads to reflection. Reflection leads to insight or release. The universe does not participate in this loop, so the loop closes elsewhere. This closure is essential. Without it, thought would spiral outward indefinitely. The mind learns that closure does not require final truth. It requires a stopping point, a place where attention can pause. Infinity offers no such place. So the mind does not seek closure there. Instead, it accepts open-endedness as background, not as a problem to solve, not as a tension to resolve. Open-endedness becomes a condition of reality, like weather, like gravity, something acknowledged, then accounted for, then left alone. This accounting is subtle. It does not involve constant awareness. It happens once, then holds quietly. The brain adjusts its expectations. It stops asking for completion where none is possible. This adjustment changes how curiosity behaves. Curiosity becomes less expansive and more precise. Sending thin across impossible scales, it focuses where insight can actually occur. Insight at human scale is relational. One idea clarifies another. One experience reframes the next. These relations form meaning. Unchanged does not emerge from totality. It emerges from connection within limits. The universe offers totality without connection. Everything exists, but nothing is emphasized. The mind offers connection without totality. Few things exist at once, but they are linked. This linking is what gives experience depth. Depth does not require vastness. It requires sustained over time. The brain protects this focus instinctively. It avoids environments where focus dissolves. Kossovit's scale dissolves focus, so the mind keeps it at a distance. Functional, not alienating. Kissed, not dismissive. Functional distance preserves coherence. The night sky no longer pulls attention outward endlessly. It frames attention inward, a reminder of boundary, a reminder of proportion. The mind does not feel smaller in response, preferring debt. Skeptical. Steadiness allows thought to complete itself, to arrive somewhere and stop. Stopping is essential. Without it, nothing could be integrated. Cobble. The mind must. This difference is not a flaw. It is complementary. The hind continues its processes uninterrupted. The mind continues its interpretations within pause and return. Neither interferes with the other. This non-interference is the quiet agreement between scale and awareness. Firefox, the brain no longer imagines itself as failing to grasp something essential. It understands that grasping was never the task. The task was coherence, continuity, the ability to move from one moment to the next without fracture. Vastness does not assist with this task, so it is set aside. Set aside does not mean rejected. It means placed correctly. To a scale of reality that exceeds lived experience. It can be studied, milling, referenced, be lived internally. Internal space is reserved for what can be carried. Thoughts that can connect, memories that can align, can rest. This reservation preserves the integrity of awareness. The mind stops mistaking capacity for obligation. Just because something exists does not mean it must be held. Existence does not assign responsibility to awareness. The universe exists freely, without need for mental containment. The mind exists locally, without need for cosmic validation. This mutual independence removes strain. Awareness no longer stretches toward infinity. It remains available to the present. Present, limited as it is, proves sufficient.